The taxi's engine hummed softly as it pulled up to my little craftsman home in the suburbs of Denver. The hospital discharge papers were folded neatly in my purse, still crisp despite the 19 days I'd spent fighting an infection after my kidney surgery. Those days felt like a lifetime tube's monitors, the sterile smell of antiseptic clinging to my skin. I was 61, a retired investigative journalist. And all I wanted was to sink into my own bed, surrounded by the familiar. My home. The place where Henry and I had built 34 years of memories. Our roses still bloomed along the front path, though they looked a little wilted after my absence. I smiled faintly, already planning to tend them tomorrow. "Need help with your bags, ma'am?" the driver asked, glancing at the walking frame I leaned on for support. My body was still weak, my steps slow, but my heart felt lighter than it. "Had in weeks just to the porch. Thank you," I said, my voice hoarse from disuse. "My son should be waiting for me." I shuffled toward the front door, the frame clicking softly against the stone path. The house stood warm in the late afternoon light, its green shutters and white trim as inviting as ever. But as I reached for the doorknob, it swung open before I could touch it. Samuel, my only child, stood there, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. I expected a smile, maybe a hug, the kind of welcome a mother dreams of after weeks in a hospital bed. Instead, his face was ... wrong, cold, unfamiliar. His eyes didn't meet mine. "Mom," said, his voice flat, formal, like he was addressing a stranger. "You shouldn't be here." Behind him, I caught a glimpse of movement in my living room. Charlotte, his wife, stepped forward, her arms crossed. And there, standing by the fireplace, were her parents, Edward and Vivian Harper. I'd only met them a few times, always polite but distant, their smiles never quite reaching their eyes. "Samuel, what's going on?" I asked, my grip tightening on the walking frame. The driver hesitated behind me, sensing the tension. Waved him off, paying him quickly, though a part of me wished he'd stay. Samuel shifted, blocking the doorway. "There's no easy way to say this," he began, his tone clipped. "Things have changed while you were in the hospital. The house ... it's not yours anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. "What are you talking about?" I managed, my voice trembling now, not from weakness, but from a growing dread. "We made arrangements," Samuel continued, his eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder. "Charlotte's parents needed a place closer to us. This house is too big for you to manage alone. The paperwork's been signed. You'll need to find somewhere else to stay." Paperwork. My mind reeled. I hadn't signed anything, not knowingly. "This is my home, Samuel," I said, stepping forward, the frame wobbling under my weight. "Let me inside now." Charlotte appeared beside him, her dark hair pulled into a sleek bun, her lips pressed into a thin line. And there, glinting at her throat, was my pearl necklace, Henry's gift for our 25th anniversary. The sight of it on her felt like a violation. "Like she'd reached into my heart and torn out a piece of it, Beatrice," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "We've packed your things. They're in boxes in the garage. Ken, have them sent wherever you're staying." Edward Harper stepped forward, his tall frame imposing, his silver hair catching the light. "I'm sorry it had to come to this," he said, not sounding sorry at all, "but it's for the best. The transfer was legal. I sputtered, my journalist's instincts kicking in despite the fog of shock. "I didn't sign anything to give up my home." Samuel's jaw tightened. "The power of attorney," he said, his voice low. "You signed it before your surgery for medical decisions. It covered ... other matters too." The realization crashed over me like a wave. Before the surgery, I'd been so anxious, so focused on the risks, that Samuel had brought me a stack of papers. "Just in case," he'd said, his voice gentle, reassuring. I'd trusted him, my son, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd supported through college, through every stumble. I hadn't read beyond the first page. You tricked me, I whispered, the words barely audible, heavy with betrayal. We're doing what's best, Charlotte cut in, her tone sharp. This house is too much for you now. Samuel's been handling things for years anyway. Don't come back, Samuel added, his voice firm, final. We'll send your things, it's done. I stood there frozen, staring at the man who used to be my little boy. The one who'd clung to my hand during thunderstorms, who'd begged me to read one more story before bed. Okay? Now he was a stranger, standing in my doorway, barring me from my own life. Something shifted inside me then. Not tears, not pleading, but a quiet, steely resolve. The kind I'd felt years ago, chasing leads for a story. Digging for truth no matter the cost. Fine, I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. Enjoy it, then. Their faces flickered with confusion at my calm response, and that small victory almost dulled the pain. Almost as I turned back to the taxi, still idling at the curb, I pulled out my phone. Not to call the police, not yet. That would come later on my terms. Instead, I sent a single text to Evelyn Sullivan. Plan B now. The hotel room in downtown Denver was small, sterile. Nothing like the warmth of my Craftsman home with its creaky floors and rose-scented air. I sat on the edge of the bed, my walking frame propped against the wall, my hands still trembling from the shock of Samuel's words. The house isn't yours anymore. They echoed in my mind, sharp and unrelenting, like a headline I couldn't unread. 19 days in the hospital, fighting to breathe, to live, and my own son had taken everything. My home, my memories. I clutched my phone, staring at the text I'd sent to Evelyn Sullivan. Plan B now. She'd replied within minutes, her words steady and sure. On my way. Stay strong. Evelyn had been my rock for nearly 40 years, ever since we met as young reporters, digging into corruption scandals. She'd left journalism for law, becoming a prosecutor who never backed down from a fight. If anyone could help me unravel this betrayal, it was her. A soft knock pulled me from my thoughts. Evelyn stood at the door, her silver hair swept in too. A neat chignon, her tailored blazer as sharp as her mind. Her eyes, those warm hazel eyes, held a fury I hadn't seen since we exposed a crooked city councilman decades ago. Those vultures, she hissed, pulling me into a gentle hug. Careful not to jostle my still healing body. Are you okay, Beatrice? Physically, emotionally? I tried to smile, but it faltered. I'm standing, I said, sinking back onto the bed. That's something. But it feels like a nightmare, Evelyn. Like I'll wake up and find Samuel waiting with coffee, not barring me from my own home. Her expression softened, but only for a moment before her prosecutor's mask returned. She set her briefcase on the desk, pulling out a stack of files with the efficiency of someone who'd spent years building cases. We'll get to the bottom of this, she said. But first, tell me everything, every detail. I recounted. The scene at the house, Samuel's cold detachment, Charlotte's false sweetness, the pearl necklace glinting at her throat. Evelyn's pen scratched furiously across her notepad, her old habit from our reporting days. When I mentioned the power of attorney, her head snapped up. You signed it before the surgery, she asked, her voice sharp. I nodded, shame creeping in. Samuel brought the papers to the hospital. I was so nervous about the procedure. Kidney surgery isn't exactly minor. He said it was for medical decisions, just in case. I trusted him. Evelyn, I didn't even read the fine print. She didn't judge, but her lips pressed into a thin line. We need to see those documents. If they used that power of attorney for anything beyond medical decisions, it's fraud. It's plain and simple. She opened her laptop, pulling up banking records she'd already started digging into. I had a contact at your bank, pulled some preliminary statements, she said. While you were in the hospital, there were withdrawals from your investment. Accounts, large ones. Over $190,000 transferred to accounts I don't recognize. My heart sank, the numbers hitting harder than I expected. That was my retirement, the nest egg Henry and I had built through years of careful saving. They stole my money too, I whispered, the betrayal cutting deeper with every revelation. It gets worse, Evelyn said, her voice grim. She slid a printed report across the desk. I had a friend in Boulder do some digging on the Harpers. Their real estate company, Harper Properties LLC, has a history. Multiple complaints filed in the last 5 years, all for predatory practices, targeting elderly homeowners. The cases were dropped before formal investigation, which smells like money or influence at work. I scanned the report, my journalist's instincts kicking in despite the ache in my chest. The Harper's company had a pattern buying up properties at below market rates, often from vulnerable owners who didn't know better. My neighborhood, with its historic homes and aging residents, was a perfect target. They're not just after my house, I said, the pieces clicking into place. They're after the whole block. Evelyn nodded. Exactly. Your house is likely their base of operations while they acquire the surrounding properties. It's a classic rezoning scheme. Buy low, push for commercial zoning, sell high. Millions. In profit. The scope of it stunned me. This wasn't just personal betrayal. It was a calculated operation. It's my home, the place where Henry and I had danced in the kitchen, where we'd read poetry under the stars, was being used as a pawn in their game. And Samuel, my Samuel, was part of it. Do you think he knows the full extent? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Or is he just caught up in Charlotte's family? Evelyn's silence was answer enough. She reached for my hand, her grip firm but gentle. We'll find out, she said. But right now, we need to be smart. They think you're defeated. A frail woman fresh out of the hospital. That's our advantage. I nodded, feeling a spark of the old fire that had driven me to chase stories through dark alleys and government offices. What's the plan? I asked. We start with evidence, Evelyn said, her eyes gleaming with the same determination we'd shared in our 20s. I've got a contact at the Financial Crimes Division who can help. And you need to dust off those investigative skills. We're going to follow the money. I reached for my purse and pulled out a small leather notebook, my lifeline from my reporting days. Every lead, every hunch, every fact I'd ever chased had started in a notebook like this. Let's document everything, I said. Every withdrawal, every lie they've told. If they're running a scam, there'll be a trail. There always is. Evelyn smiled, a sharp predatory grin that reminded me why we'd been such a formidable team. That's the Beatrice I know, she said. They have no idea what they're up against. As we began mapping out our next steps, my phone buzzed. With a text from Samuel, Mom, we need your bank login details to manage your accounts for your care. Please send them soon. I showed the message to Evelyn, who shook her head in disgust. Don't reply, she said. Let them stew. Let them. Wonder, I set the phone down, my heart heavy but my resolve stronger than ever. The old Beatrice might have responded, desperate to keep the peace, to hold on to the son she loved. But that Beatrice was gone, left behind on the porch of her stolen home. This Beatrice was playing a longer game, one where the truth would be. Her weapon. 3 days had passed since I'd been turned away from my own home. And the shock still lingered, sharp as a fresh wound. But with every hour spent in that sterile Denver hotel room, poring over documents with Evelyn, my pain was hardening into something else purpose. My little leather notebook was filling up fast, each page a map of the Harper's deceit, Evelyn's. Contacts had come through, pulling records that showed the Harper's company. Harper Properties LLC had been quietly buying up homes in my neighborhood. Not just mine, but the Wilsons 2 doors down, the Hendersons across the street, all elderly couples on fixed incomes. It wasn't random. It was a plan. They're after the whole block, Evelyn said, her voice low as she spread a map. Across the hotel desk, her finger traced the properties, each marked with a red X. If they control enough of these lots, they can push for commercial rezoning. Your neighborhood's just outside Denver's booming downtown? Rezone it. And the property values triple. We're talking millions. My stomach twisted. My home, the place where Henry and I had planted roses, where we'd laughed over late-night coffee in the kitchen, was just a chess piece in their scheme. And Samuel, my own son, was helping them move the pieces. The thought made my chest ache, but I pushed it aside. There'd be time for grief later. Right now, I needed answers. How do we prove it? I asked my journalist's mind, already chasing the next lead. We need hard evidence, something that ties them directly to fraud. Evelyn's eyes gleamed, the way they used to when we were young reporters sniffing out a scoop. We go to the source, she said. Your house. They're using it as their base. If there's proof, it's there. The plan was risky, but simple. Charlotte had a standing yoga class every Wednesday morning, and Edward and Vivian were scheduled for a real estate meeting across town. Samuel would be at work. The house would be empty or close to it. I'd go in, find what I could, and get out. Evelyn had already looped in her contact at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, Agent Laura Bennett, who agreed to stand by in case things went south. The morning was crisp, the Denver air carrying a hint of autumn as the taxi dropped me a block from my house. I moved slowly, my walking frame clicking against the sidewalk, more for appearances than necessity. I wanted to look frail, unthreatening, a grieving widow, not a woman on a mission. My neighborhood looked the same as always. Tidy lawns, historic homes, the old maple tree where Samuel used to climb. But beneath the surface, everything felt tainted, like a story I'd misread. I noticed the changes as I approached my house. The rose bushes I'd tended for decades were gone, replaced with stark, modern landscaping. The porch swing Henry and I had restored was missing, its absence a small, sharp stab. They were erasing us piece by piece. I didn't head for the front door. Instead, I slipped around to the side of the house, to the small window of my study. It was a secret Henry and I had kept, a latch that never quite locked right. One Samuel had used as a teenager to sneak in after curfew, thinking we never knew. I pried it open, my heart pounding as I eased myself through, careful not to aggravate my still healing body. The study smelled different, not of old books and ink, but of unfamiliar cologne and cleaning products. It wasn't mine anymore, not yet. Voices drifted from the living room. I froze, my pulse racing. The house wasn't empty. Edging closer to the door, I recognized Edward Harper's deep, confident tone. The Henderson deal closes Friday. He said, once we have their place, we'll control 40% of the block. Enough to push the rezoning through. What about Beatrice's accounts? Another voice asked, unfamiliar, likely one of their associates. We used her credentials to secure the loans for the Wilson property. Clean as a whistle. My hand tightened around my walking frame, anger flaring hot in my chest. They were using my name, my financial reputation, to fund their scam. I slipped my phone from my pocket, opened the recording app, and pressed start. This was the evidence we needed. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the study door open. The room went silent, 3 pairs of eyes snapping to me. Edward Harper stood behind Henry's oak desk, papers spread before him. His associate, a wiry man in a cheap suit, hovered by the window looking like he'd seen a ghost. A third man, younger, stood near the bookshelf, clutching a laptop. Beatrice, Edward said, recovering quickly, his smile tight. This is unexpected. How did you get in? Through the window, I said calmly, leaning on my frame. In my study, in my house, which, as far as I know, still legally belongs to me. The wiry man shifted nervously. Should I come back later, Mr. Harper? No need, I said before Edward could respond. I'm just here for some personal papers. I moved toward the filing cabinet in the corner, my heart hammering but my face composed, though I couldn't help overhearing. Using my banking credentials for your financing? That's bold. Edward's face paled, just for a moment, before his charm returned. You're mistaken, Beatrice. Your hospitalization has clearly taken a toll. You're confused. I smiled thinly, pulling a folder from the cabinet. Am I? The Henderson property funded with my credentials? I heard you say it clear as day. The wiry man edged toward the door. I should go, he muttered. Beatrice is unwell, Edward said sharply, his voice laced with menace. Her mental state isn't what it used to be. Isn't that right? My mental state is sharper than ever, I said, closing the drawer. Sharp enough to know exactly what you, Vivian, and Charlotte are doing. Sharp enough to wonder if Samuel understands the legal consequences of the fraud he's helping you pull off. Edward's mask slipped, his eyes narrowing. You have no proof, he snapped. And even if you did, no one would believe a frail old woman over her own son. Get out before I call the police for trespassing. I held up my phone, the recording app glowing on the screen. Proof is everything, I said, and I've got plenty. His face contorted with fury. Give me that phone, he growled, lunging toward me. I stumbled back, pain shooting through my side as I gripped the frame for balance. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in, and for a moment I thought I'd miscalculated everything. Let go of me, I shouted loud enough to echo through the house. The front door burst open, footsteps pounding. FBI hands where we can see them. Agent Bennett's voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding. Edward froze, his grip loosening as two. Agents stormed in, weapons drawn. The wiry man raised his hands, his face ashen. The younger man dropped his laptop, backing against the wall. Beatrice Langley. Agent Bennett approached, her eyes scanning me for injuries. Are you all right? I steadied myself against the doorframe, clutching the folder I'd grabbed. I said, my voice shaking but strong. And I have something you'll want to hear. The FBI field office in Denver was cold. All beige walls and fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. I sat in an interview room, my walking frame resting against the chair. My hip throbbing despite the painkillers Agent Bennett had offered. The folder I grabbed from my study lay on the table, its contents now in the hands of the agents combing through Edward Harper's schemes. My recording, the one where he'd admitted to using my financial credentials, was already being processed as evidence. It was a victory, but it felt hollow. Brittle battle was still ahead. Facing Samuel, Agent Bennett slid into the chair across. From me, her expression professional but kind. Mrs. Langley, your recording is gold, she said, closing her notebook. Combined with the documents you and Evelyn provided, we've got enough for warrants on all Harper properties and their business records. We're executing a search at your house tonight. Charlotte and Samuel will be brought in for questioning. Heart tightened at the mention of my son's name. What about my house? I asked. My accounts. We've got an emergency injunction freezing all transactions related to your property, she assured me. No one can sell or transfer it until ownership is clarified. As for your accounts, we're tracing the funds now. Relief washed over me, but it was tempered by the weight of what was coming. Charlotte was in custody, Edward too, but Samuel Hay wasn't supposed to be home when the raid happened. I'd hoped to spare him the shock to confront him quietly at his office. Now he'd face the full force of the FBI alongside his wife. Are you sure you want to be there? Evelyn asked, her hand resting on mine as we sat in the back of an unmarked FBI van across from my house. The evening light cast long shadows over the lawn where Samuel used to play catch with Henry. Charlotte's sleek SUV was in the driveway, and Samuel's car was parked beside it. He'd come home early. I have to, I said, my voice firm despite the ache in my chest. This is my home. Need to see this through. Agent Bennett nodded from the driver's seat, listening to updates through her earpiece. There. In position, she said quietly. Charlotte and Samuel are inside. Before I could respond, a convoy of vehicles turned onto the street to sedans and a tactical van. Agents spilled out, some in FBI windbreakers, moving with practiced precision. Federal agents, we have a warrant. Their voices rang out, sharp and clear in the quiet neighborhood. The front door opened. Charlotte appeared, her face shifting from confusion to panic. Samuel stepped out beside her, his expression bewildered, his hand reaching instinctively. For hers, I watched from the van, my heart torn between vindication and sorrow. Neighbors peeked from their windows, drawn by the commotion. Their whispers a faint hum in the evening air. "It's time," Bennett said, opening her door. "Stay behind us, please." As we crossed the street, Charlotte's eyes locked on me, her composure shattering. "Hugh," she spat, her voice shrill. "You did this." Samuel's gaze followed hers, his face crumpling as he saw me with the agents. "Mom." His voice cracked, a mix of confusion and fear. "What's happening?" Agent Bennett stepped forward, her tone formal. "Your mother has provided evidence of financial fraud by the Harper family. We're here to search the premises and seize all relevant documents." "Fraud?" Samuel repeated, his eyes darting between me and the agents. "What are you talking about? This is a mistake, is it?" Stepping forward, my walking frame tapping the pavement. "Edward was very clear this morning. Samuel, in my study, using my banking credentials to fund their schemes. In my house." Charlotte's face went white. "You were here?" she stammered. "How?" "The study window," I said simply. "You never learned all the secrets of this house, Charlotte. Like the fact that it's held in a trust Henry set up, one that requires Evelyn's signature. To transfer, which she never gave." Samuel's eyes widened, his confusion deepening. "Mom, I thought we were helping you." "Charlotte said the house was too much for you, that you'd be better off in a smaller place." "I didn't helping me." My voice stayed steady, but the hurt bled through. "By stealing my home, draining my accounts, using my name to scam our neighbors. Mrs. Harper, Mr. Langley, you're both coming with us for questioning." Bennett interrupted, gesturing toward the vehicles. Charlotte's panic gave way to a calculated calm. "I want my lawyer," she said icily. "I'm not saying anything." "That's your right," Bennett replied, then turned to Samuel. "Mr. Langley, we need to speak with you too." "Don't understand," Samuel said, his voice hollow. "Mom, what have you done?" The question stung so backward it felt like a betrayal all over again. "What have I done?" I repeated, meeting his gaze. "I've protected myself, Samuel, and our neighbors, from people who think they can take whatever they want without consequences. Taught you better than that. Your father taught you better." The agents led Charlotte to a car. She turned back, her eyes blazing. "You think this is over? My father's lawyers will bury you. Your father's in custody," I said calmly. "So is your mother. The FBI's searching your Boulder offices as we speak. It's done, Charlotte." Samuel stood frozen on the porch, watching his agents carry boxes of documents from our home. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice breaking, "I didn't know everything. You have to believe me?" I studied his face, searching for the boy I'd raised. The one who'd once cried over a lost library book because it wasn't fair to the next reader. "Maybe you didn't know everything," I said, my voice soft but firm. "But you knew. Enough. And you chose them over me." As I turned to walk back to the van with Evelyn, Samuel called after me, his voice desperate. "Where am I supposed to go now? I didn't look back." His question echoed the one I'd faced when he locked me out of my own home. The irony wasn't lost on me, but there was no satisfaction in it, only a deep, aching sadness for what we'd both lost. Back in the hotel room, Evelyn poured us tea, her hands steady despite the day's chaos. "You did well," she said. "That recording will nail them." I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying Samuel's face, his plea. Then my phone buzzed with an email from Agent Bennett. "If you need to see this," she'd written, attaching a file. I opened it, my breath catching as I read. It was a series of text messages between Edward Harper and a hospital nurse, dated during my stay. Instructions to adjust my medication to delay recovery without raising suspicion. My infection, the one that kept me hospitalized for 19 days instead of 5, hadn't been an accident. They'd planned it, and there was more. A document outlining a transfer to a nursing home in Montana, a place with minimal oversight, where I'd be comfortably settled far from anyone who knew me. My hands shook as I handed the phone to Evelyn. They didn't just want my house, I whispered, the truth sinking in. They wanted me gone. Evelyn's face darkened. This is bigger than fraud, Beatrice. This is elder abuse. Maybe worse. Does Samuel know? I asked, dreading the answer. We don't know yet, Evelyn said carefully. But we'll find out. I closed my eyes, the weight of it all pressing down. It's my own son, caught in this web of deceit. Had he known they were poisoning me, planning to lock me away? I needed to see him again, to look into his eyes and know the truth. Because if he did, I wasn't sure my heart could bear it. The first morning back in my Craftsman home felt like waking from a long, terrible dream. The air smelled of roses. Again, though the garden was overgrown, the petals scattered across the lawn like forgotten promises. The FBI had returned my keys after their search, and the house was mine again, legally, undeniably. But it didn't feel like home, not yet. The Harpers had left their mark, furniture rearranged. My study cluttered with their files, Henry's favorite armchair pushed into a corner. It was as if they'd tried to erase us, to rewrite our story. But I wasn't ready to let them win. I started small, reclaiming the space one piece at a time. I dragged Henry's armchair back to its spot by the window, where he used to read his Sunday paper. I spent hours in the garden pruning the rose bushes, my hands trembling from the effort but steadied by purpose. The walking frame was gone now, replaced by a cane, a quiet sign of my recovery. Each clip of the shears felt like a step toward healing not just the garden, but me. The legal fallout came swiftly. Edward and Vivian Harper were charged with fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy, facing 15 to 20 years in prison. Charlotte, their daughter, got a similar sentence, her polished facade crumbling in court as she pleaded for leniency. Samuel's case was different. He'd cooperated with the FBI, providing details about the Harpers' operations, which reduced his sentence to 4 years with a chance for parole in 2. The judge called him complicit but manipulated, a phrase that echoed in my mind long after the gavel fell. Manipulated. That word carried so much weight. The FBI's investigation uncovered the truth about Samuel's role. He'd been in debt, trapped by a reckless gambling scheme from years ago that the Harpers had used to control him. They'd promised to clear his name, to pay off his debts if he helped them secure my house. He hadn't known about the tampered medication or the Montana nursing home plan at least. That's what he claimed in his tearful statement to the court. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to see the boy who'd once run to me with scraped knees. Not the man who'd locked me out of my own life. A letter arrived a month after the trial, written in Samuel's careful handwriting. Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me, it began. I was weak, and I let you down. I let Dad down. I'll live with that forever. He wrote about his shame, his regret. How he'd thought he was protecting his family, Charlotte, their unborn child I hadn't even known about. The words blurred as I read, tears falling onto the page. I wasn't ready to forgive, not yet. But I tucked the letter into Henry's old desk, a small promise to myself that I'd read it again one day. Life began to stitch itself back together, slowly like the roses finding their shape under my care. Clara Reed, a retired freelance writer who lived across the street, became a friend in those quiet weeks. She'd knock on my door with a thermos of coffee, her sharp wit and warm laugh filling the empty spaces in my home. We'd sit on the porch, watching the neighborhood come back to life. The Wilsons and Hendersons reclaiming their homes too, thanks to the evidence I'd helped uncover. Clara called us the Survivors Club, and it stuck. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We're a community bound by what we'd endured. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Clara asked me what I planned to do next. "You've got your house back, Beatrice," she said, her eyes searching mine. "But what about you? What's next for Beatrice Langley?" I didn't have an answer then, but the question lingered. I'd spent my career as a journalist chasing truth, exposing lies, giving voice to the voiceless. The Harpers had tried to silence me, to make me feel small, frail, disposable. They'd failed, and in their failure I saw a purpose bigger than myself. I started small, like with the roses. I reached out to a local nonprofit offering to lead workshops on protecting seniors from financial scams. My years as an investigative journalist gave me the tools to teach how to spot red flags, read fine print, ask the right questions. The first session was held at the community center, a dozen gray-haired faces watching me with a mix of curiosity and gratitude. By the third session, the room was full. People brought their stories, their fears, their own brushes with betrayal. I listened, shared my own, and together we built something stronger than loss. Knowledge. Empowerment. Hope. 8 months after the trial, I drove to the correctional facility where Samuel was serving his sentence. I wasn't sure why I went. Maybe it was his letter, or the memory of Henry's voice telling me family was worth fighting for. The visiting room was stark, all metal tables and flickering lights. Samuel looked thinner, his eyes shadowed, but softer than I remembered. "Mom," he said, his voice catching as he sat across from me. "You came." "I did," I said, my cane resting beside me. "I'm not here to forgive you, Samuel. Not yet. But I'm here to listen." He nodded, tears brimming, and started to talk about his mistakes, his regrets. The child he'd never see grow up if Charlotte stayed in prison. I listened, not promising anything, but feeling the tiniest crack in the wall I'd built around my heart. Back home, sat in my study, the window open to let in the scent of roses. Henry's old typewriter sat on the desk, a relic from our early days chasing stories together. I ran my fingers over its keys, thinking about the scars we carry, some visible, like the one on my side from surgery, some hidden, like the one Samuel and I had left on each other. They say a wound is where the light gets in. I used to think that was just a pretty phrase, something to stitch onto a pillow. But now I believe it. My pain, my betrayal, had led me to this moment, to a community that leaned on me, to a purpose that filled the empty spaces. I'd lost my son, at least for a time, but I'd found something else, a reason to keep going, to keep writing the story of my life. And maybe, just maybe, there was room in that story for Samuel again. Not today, but someday. For now, I'd tend my roses, teach my workshops, and let the light keep finding its way in. Life doesn't spare us pain, especially not as we grow older. Betrayal, loss, the things we never saw coming, they leave scars that ache in the quiet moments. But those scars don't define us. They're proof we survived. They're the places where we learn to fight, to rebuild, to find meaning in what's broken. My story isn't just about losing a home or a son, it's about discovering that even at 61, I could start again. That I could turn my pain into something that lifts others up. If you're carrying a wound, look for the light. It lets in. It's there, waiting for you to find it.